Okay, so today's webinar is on measuring progress with the 10 steps. And as I mentioned briefly in our introduction, there's going to be a very short introduction from myself, Claire Collins. I'm Membership Manager at WISE, and I'm just going to give you a summary of the 10 steps results and the themes that came out of our meeting in October. We're then going to be hearing from Zoe Madams from MACE, and she's going to be talking about how MACE share good practice within the company and how they've been using the 10 steps. And then we're going to be hearing from Shelley Cotton from BAM Nuttall on using the 10 steps in their company. Next slide, please, Catherine. Okay, so the 10 steps results were first presented at the WISE 10 Steps Making Progress event in October, and they were presented there by Anne-Marie Tuck. Anne-Marie is our development manager and she looks after our 10 Steps program. Stephen Howes has recently joined us as a research manager and he had a few slides in there as well, and we will go through those in a minute. Next slide, please. So for those, I'm assuming everybody here is aware of what 10 steps is. We had 27 attendee organisations respond in the survey, which is roughly around about a 50% response rate, which is fantastic. We really appreciated all the companies sending in all of their data. We couldn't do this without your participation, and we really appreciate it. And over 30 signatories attended the event on the 19th of October in 2018. And as you'll see in a few minutes, the results continue to be very encouraging. Next slide, please. So this is the key slide, really. The performance on each of the 10 steps in 2018. So each of these 10 steps have been amalgamated results, and then we rank the results according to where the company's doing well and where the companies aren't doing so well. So this is effectively an average of all of the different responses that came in from the 10 step survey. And as you can see, for the third year in a row, approaching this like any other business improvement project is doing fantastically well. Companies are really approaching this in the correct manner. They're approaching it in a very business-like manner, and once again that's top of the ranking for all 3 years. And similarly, the other three following positions, so making flexible working a reality for all, changing mindsets by challenging bias and sexism, and understanding the starting point to monitor progress, they've all been in the top 4 over the last 3 years, a little bit of movement in where they were placed, but roughly those are the 4 areas that are doing really well. As you move down, you can see that sharing learning and good practice and sponsoring female talent to the same extent as male talent is starting to actually sponsoring female talent to the same extent as male talent, we can see has moved up through the rankings. So last 2 years that was 9th in the rankings, it's now moved up to 6th. That's very encouraging news. And similarly, demonstrating to women that you want to retain and develop them, move down slightly, but not much. And it's just so encouraging to see these facts and figures staying roughly the same or improving. The areas that are really need some improvement in for most companies is being creative in their job design, increasing the transparency of opportunities for progression, and finally that old chestnut of educating your leaders and giving them accountability for change. So we're going to talk through these results a little bit more. So could we have the next slide, please? So as you can see, there were some really positive results available after the scoring process this year, particularly as we see an improvement in specific areas. As we saw last year, some companies' scores are staying the same, decreasing potentially. This might just be down to the fact we're now getting a much better understanding of what's actually really happening in all these organisations. People have got the hold of the idea of the process of 10 steps and the process that we use, and they're starting to think a little bit more in detail about how well they actually do all of these different areas, and that can change the results and the scoring slightly. Where organisations have compiled scores from multiple employee responses, and we're going to see a little bit about that later in one of the other presentations, those scores can be lower than most derived from just one manager completing the diagnostic, and I think that's going to be talked about in sufficient detail later on, so I'm not going to talk about it much here, but it's just really encouraging that people are starting to get other employees within the organisation involved and asking for a response from more and more people in the organisation rather than just assuming one person is aware of what's going on. For the third year on, most companies have been very self-critical and realistic, and they've started to involve more people, and that's really nice to see. But some high scorers from the last couple of years did not attend this year, and this may have affected our results slightly. So all of this has to be taken into account. Next slide, please. This is just showing the results in a different way. Many of you will be familiar with this diagram, spider diagram. And we're looking here at the different results. Again, it's an average of the results across all the organisations. And as we can see here, there's some areas that do really well. Business improvement projects, flexible working is improving, changing mindsets. But educating your leader continues to be quite low on the scoreboard. Also, transparency of opportunities and job design, that, as we've seen previously in the other results, those areas are still struggling. Next slide, please. So this is quite an interesting slide. We're looking at those particular areas that could do with some improvement. So has there been any improvement in do leaders understand and articulate the business case for D&I? Well, actually, there has been a slight improvement. Compared to 2017, it was 70% understood and articulated that business case. There's been an improvement this year to 76%. Similarly, more and more people are being trained on unconscious bias. But there's been actually in some areas drops. So do leaders have performance targets related to D&I? It's a bit of a controversial area. Some organisations don't like to put performance targets specifically against D&I because it's a difficult area to measure and to balance against. So there's this kind of this more detail and more thought going into all of these different results, and we've got to take that into account when we look at the results that are being reported across the organisations. Do leaders act as mentors and sponsors? Yes, they're still acting as leaders and sponsors, could be better, about 70%. And do they lead by example to raise the profile of diversity issues? There seems to have been a drop there. So these different areas give some indication as to the points of view that we could work on, areas that companies can improve on, and it's just another way of looking at the results that have come out of this survey and thinking in a little bit more detail about the results. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to talk here about some of the different business cases and information that's available on the WISE website. So if you're not aware, WISE has a business case for diversity, and it's an extremely valuable document. It's updated regularly with more information. It's effectively thought leadership, and it's an excellent way of getting the business case for gender diversity across to leaders who may struggle to understand why it's important for a business to have diversity and inclusion, and for them to think about gender balance in companies. So I would highly recommend that if you haven't looked at our business case, please do go online to the website, and the link is at the bottom there, and you can always click onto that link and go and have a look at it at a later date and in your own time. So a lot of information there, and I'd strongly suggest anybody interested in trying to re-educate leaders or trying to make the case for gender diversity can go and have a look at that paper. Next slide, please. 10 steps clickable. In case you weren't aware, the 10 steps part of our website, and there's another link below. The 10 steps part of the website is a clickable resource where you can actually go into the website, and each of those different petals can be clicked on, as you can see in the middle icon, and then it will take you through to specific resources to do with that particular area of 10 steps. So it might be a case of linking you through to previous webinars, linking you through to the business case, linking you through to training, linking you through to best practice. All of these different results and information are available on our website. And again, I strongly recommend that anybody who's interested in trying to find out more about 10 steps and trying to find out a little bit more best practice, go on and have a look at our website in that case. Next slide, please. mostly covering what I've just said. There's previous webinars, knowledge sharing, best practice papers, training and workshops, all available on the 10 Steps workshop, 10 Steps pages. Next slide, please. So we're always on the lookout for more data, as you can tell. There's been a lot of responses to, a few responses to the Women in STEM roles data received so far. We are looking for more data, but we do have some emerging trends coming out from the data we have got. Has been limited responses to date, so please don't take this as any final data results, but it's just worth telling you and giving you a little bit of a glimpse into some of the results that are coming through and some of the information that WISE is working on sort of looking at in the future. So can we move on to the next slide, please? So this just gives you just a little bit of a snapshot, really. How is female employment changing? What's the averages from just some of the responses that we've had? Well, we can see that actually there's a good proportion of total number of employees who are female, 23%. But when you start to look at the STEM roles, that significantly drops, which I suspect none of us are particularly surprised by. When you then look again at senior management roles, in females and senior management roles, again, drop to 14%, and then a total drop down to about 8% of STEM-related employees in senior management roles who are female. So it's probably information that a lot of us were thinking was there, but this is real data, this is real results, this is real companies giving us their results. And it's a really crucial resource for being able to provide the business case to your leaders and try and convince them these changes need to happen. So we'll keep you updated on our research into this area, but if you would like to take part and send in some results for that research, then I'll give you the contact details at the end. But we've got Anne-Marie as our, as I mentioned, development manager working on 10 steps. She'd be very happy to hear from anybody who'd like to take part in that research. Next slide, please. And again, 10 Steps is continually developing as a resource. We have the new clickable website and we're constantly adding new resources to that. All of you are members, and so I'm sure you're aware that you need to log on to the website before you go in to look at 10 Steps, and because obviously we have to restrict it to 10 step signatories. So please do make sure that you've logged in, and if you can't log into the website or you find you're having issues, contact your membership manager and find out how you can get into the website, because these new resources being added all the time. We're going to put this webinar on there, there's best practices going on there, lots of information, so please do go and have a look at the website if you haven't done that recently. Online benchmarking is going to be coming soon, which I'm sure you're all going to be very happy about. Probably a bit of a pain having to keep filling in all of these Excel spreadsheets. New best practices and case studies, as I say, are constantly being updated. New information is going online, so please do go and have a look. 10 steps for SMEs and 10 steps for academic institutions. We are continuing to work on those. If you're interested in getting involved with that, please do contact us. And as always, personalised 10 steps workshops are available, and you can work with a senior member of our WISE team, to help build individual action plans. So if you haven't booked your 10 steps workshop or you're interested in having one, then please do contact us. Okay, next slide, please. And there's the contact results. If you'd like to take part in any of our research into senior women in STEM or women in STEM roles, if you've got any questions about 10 steps, or if you'd like to arrange a workshop, please do contact Anne-Marie Tuck. She's the development manager here at WISE, and that's her email address. As I say, her email address and all the contact details are available online. So if we quickly skip over this slide, you'll be able to come back to it at a later date or find it on the website. Okay, next slide, please. If you've got any questions and answers, as we've said previously, please do enter them into the box on the right-hand side of your screen, and then I'll select a handful to answer at the end. And And we've already had one question come in to say, so somebody's asking what STEM and D&I are acronyms for. So as we go forward, I'm sure you're going to hear those a lot. So STEM is an acronym for science, technology, engineering and maths, and it's used as a shorthand for those subjects. And D&I is diversity and inclusion. So there we go, we've got our first question. At the end, if you've got any other questions for our panelists or any of our presenters, then please do enter them and we'll answer those just after each of the presentations. Next slide, please. Okay, I'd like to hand over here to Zoe Madams, and she's going to take over and take you through her slides on sharing good practice in MACE.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zoe Madams. You just want to click on to the next slide. I hope I'm going to be good with the slide clicking. I always forget. I carry on talking and forget that I've got to move the slides on. For those who don't know MACE, I thought I'd just give you a quick guided tour about us as a business. We are an international construction and consultancy business. We sit at actually just over 6,000 people now, because these were stats that were taken at the end of last year. We were formed back in 1991 by 5 gentlemen that were working for Bovis, and we still are a privately owned business, which I think is one of the reasons why maybe instigating a change can be simpler than maybe some other organisations, because we still have a very supportive board of 7 individuals. Just from our service offers, we sit across 4 major sectors. So development, we have developments such as Greenwich Peninsula. We have a consultancy business, which is where I sit. We actually have a construction business as well, which is responsible for building the Shard and other big iconic landmarks in London. And we have a facilities management business, and that is across the globe for each of those sectors. So that is one of our major challenges that we have. So we'll go on to talk a little bit about some of the things that we do, but trying to consistently roll anything out across our business can be challenging. We work in some difficult sectors, and like the Middle East and South Africa. So we are working hard as a business to make sure that we are consistently working the same, which comes with quite a few challenges. If we just skip on to the next slide. So like any major business, we have our missions and our values and our vision. The one that always sits most prevalently with me is the fact of pursuit of a better way. So the people that run our business, we've always wanted to do things slightly differently from everyone else. When we first started out 28 years ago, it was about actually how we could shake up the construction industry. So we are working very hard at this point in time to try and put some wrongs right, I think, across the female industry and how we work and operate. And I will go through some of those things today, but we've made a lot of quite big commitments this year. Some of them are already coming into play. But yes, it's to us as a business, having a diverse workforce is really important, because that makes us different, that makes us better. So can we just go on to the next slide? So a little bit about me. So I'm PMO Services. I sit across the whole of our consultancy division. So there's 120 of us, I think, that sit within PMO Services at the moment. I look after all the project controls elements of our projects, programs and portfolios. So there is, across our consultancy, there is about 700-800 of us, but about 120 sit within my business unit. So we work on projects and programs such as Hinkley C, Heathrow expansion program, the London Legacy development work down at Stratford. We even work as far as Tiffany as well. So we have quite a diverse group of individuals that work throughout our team. We do at MACE have some targets every year, and the session that we did last time, we did talk about, you know, what good and bad targets does to businesses. But year on year, we do actually have targets that we have to hit as business unit directors. So we had a target of 2017 to hit a target of 31% women within our team. We actually finished the year at 42%. And that's not anything that we purposely did or we actively did. We just grew organically. And there's some important lessons learned, I think, when we talk about how we bring good talent into our business. We're not just doing it to hit numbers. We're doing it because you know, they are the best people out there and they are right for our business. I know we're not talking too much about the sort of the diversity elements of it, but we also we sit as quite a diverse group across BAMI. We also, if you look at our targets for gender diversity at the highest level, so this is associate director and above, which is where a lot of businesses fall short. We had a target of only 6.81%, which was low, and we finished at 20%. This year, I think we're looking at already about 35%. So even though it's been very good for us as a business and our targets were relatively low, actually, if you look at some of the things that have happened already over the last year, how we're instigating some change is really important. So if we just go down to the next slide. So these were our results. When I did the session, the live session, we had a little bit of kickback from the audience about some of our results, and actually it's going to completely change how we approach the 10 steps next year, because at the most senior level at MACE, which is our privately owned board, for which there are 6 men and one woman, we have very strong leadership around how we want to move forward as a business around gender equality. So therefore, if you sit at that level in MACE, you see all the brilliant work that goes on, and we have done so much this year. What we want to do next year is filter that down across the different sectors and the different business units. So actually, one of the things I've been speaking to our chief exec about is, you know, we have pockets of amazing behaviours. Let's benchmark those amazing behaviours against maybe the areas where we're not doing so well, and see how we can improve those. So we're going to have a slightly different approach to how we deal with that this year. I think one of the next year. One of the things that's really changed us as a business, and I think changed industry, is the fact that we had you know, the gender pay gap report, for which we at MACE didn't fare very well. I think we'd always felt as a business that we were the best of a bad lot. Turns out we're not. We are consistently bad across many industries. But what it actually gave us was a benchmark, gave us a baseline of where we are. And I think it's important. I mean, I'm in project control, so if we're doing any kind of project or any kind of change program, you actually have to look at where you are and where you want to get to. There are some real positives around how we've approached 2018 and going on to 2019. So educate our leaders. I will talk a little bit about some of the not just the unconscious bias elements of what we're doing, but some other training and ways of working that we're starting to roll out. Flexible working has definitely become the norm in MACE. I personally have had 3 or 4 women come back off maternity leave that have asked for flexible working, and actually as a business we are really starting to support that. We've got a very good process in which we go through to have it agreed, but every person that's asked for flexible working within our business has been granted it so far. Retain and develop, not just from a female perspective, but us as a business, we have a 2022 strategy which covers 4 key areas. One of those areas is retain and develop, and we are looking at reducing our targets to 10% retention. So we are looking at it overall, but I am personally with the Inclusion Steering Group, which is one of the boards that I sit on, looking at how we improve our retention across our female staff, and business improvement projects. I'll talk more about those as I go through, because we've got a few things that we've got in the pipeline. Can we just go to the next slide? So one of the things that we did 3 years ago was set out our Women in the Future programme. So the first time that we rolled it out, it came with a little bit of mixed response. I was initially on the Women of the Future programme back in 2016. And even though I knew it was really important, I wasn't 100% sure how we were rolling it out. There was such a big agenda that was set out for us, but I think we're now starting the next cohort. Actually, there's a slide a little bit further on that I actually talk about the stats. But actually, it's all about how we sponsor the women in our business, and it's now I see how important that framework was. And I've spoken to some other businesses recently, and they said, you know, we're just starting this whole journey. What should we do? And actually, ironically, now I go back, because 2016, I didn't feel that maybe it was the only thing that we should be doing. It's a really good starting point. So if we just quickly go to the next slide. And the reason why it's an important starting block is actually 56% of all the women that participated in that Women in the Future program have been promoted since. So the program itself is very much about sponsoring your own internal talent, looking at your own brand, looking at the opportunities, and and how you work within MACE. So it's a year-long program. With I think, just because one of my girls is sitting outside, she could tell me, we take 1 or 2 days a month, and there's lots of different learning modules that we go through, and we actually treat it like a proper qualification, where at the end of it you get a certificate and stuff, and it's very well attended and it's very well supported. So if we just click onto the next slide. Probably do this in slightly the wrong order, which made it a little bit more challenging. So the first program we had 54 women. That was back in 2016. The second cohort that we had 30 women from the UK, but then we expanded it across the international business. And that was a really important stepping stone for us, because as a global business, we can't just concentrate on the UK. And actually being part of this program and being part of the different boards that I sit on across MACE, it's easy to leave our international colleagues behind. And even some of the countries where you think you're the most aligned to, I'm going to use America as an example, some of their behaviours that the teams and just across the businesses, they have a lot of similar challenges, but in some cases worse challenges. So off the back of that, so we've launched 2018, we've had 56% of those ladies have been promoted, which is a really, really important benchmark for us as a business. So if we just click on to the next slide. So this is our roadmap. So I've tried to, there's quite a lot on it, but actually I think it's really important that all these things are happening concurrently, because each one of them is starting to frame how we are going to operate as a business. So the gender pay gap came out in March 2019, which was disappointing but not surprising to most of us. Off the back of that, we started the inclusion board. That was actually already underway. It wasn't just the gender pay gap that kicked that off. I think what that allowed us to do, though, is give us probably more clout than we maybe would have had before. So rather than us spending years and years trying to instigate some of the frameworks and some of the training that was required, it's actually gave us probably a little bit more funding off the back of that, which has allowed us to move much quicker. So the inclusion strategy was agreed. So for us, it doesn't just include our female resources, it's completely across the board. We've done a lot around LGBT this year. Our chief executive marched with us at Pride, which was a very important benchmark, I think, for our community here. So we've looked at the female inclusivity with all our other diversity agendas. We have approved our inclusion manager. So we have an inclusion manager that's just about to start. We kind of feel that actually this agenda is so big, it's more than just an HR role. We need someone that just is concentrating on the whole piece. So that is a big milestone for us. We rolled out the unconscious bias training, which I think 40% of our business have gone through to date. The objective is for everyone to have gone through it this year. I did actually, when we did the session last time, one of the ladies that attended, she said actually the online training is probably not the best way to do it. And I found out since then that the training is online. I thought actually we were having classroom training. But off of the back of that comment, what we're actually going to do is we're going to follow up with some classroom training as part of our health and safety. So everyone in MACE has to do health and safety training. So actually we're going to follow up and we're going to include some of that unconscious bias training within some of our classroom training modules. So a very important milestone, which I didn't get to talk about at the last session, is our behavioural framework that has just been launched, for which inclusion and diversity sits within that framework. So our board has set out a 24 behaviours that everyone in MACE has to sign up to. So it's just come down to the sort of the first level board directors to roll out across our business, but they are very stringent behaviours. For me, it's a little bit like the difference between right and wrong, but it's quite clearly set out how our board and how MACE is expecting us to behave. And that really supports the other agendas. So unconscious bias sits within that framework, inclusion sits within that framework, and we will, as part of our appraisal processes and as part of our line management duties, make sure that we are driving those behaviours. So it's the behaviours that are really supporting the inclusion and diversity. So it's a very important milestone for us, because that really helps support everything that we have to do, and everyone has to sign up to the MACE behaviours. Another big part, and I'm going to talk about it in a little bit more detail, bespoke vacancy training. We are rolling out in January, and I will talk about it in more detail. But I think one of the things that's come as a real surprise to MACE, we have our own recruitment business called MACE People, who support us, and actually some of the content, some of the things they look at has come as a real surprise to them as a business. So that gets launched in January. We have the third cohort for Women of the Future. Oh, sorry, I did say it was the end of the year. Well, the MACE conscious bias training to be complete, but it's March. So that is our roadmap. I will talk a little bit more, if we go to the next slide, about the fact we've really started to see some changes already as part of that roadmap. So we did touch on it earlier about the fact around our recruitment. So I don't think anyone quite realised how much of how we bring people into the business is around how our wording, our adverts, how we go out and approach. I don't know, I made all my team watch the Karen Brady Channel 5 documentary about why men get paid more than women, and actually it's become a very important focus to our director of MACE People, because I think even he was surprised that you had women recruiters that were actually making the same mistakes or acting the same way as some of our gentlemen recruiters. So we have done a lot of work on how we phrase our adverts. The biggest change that we have, and I will talk about it in a second, is about the fact that every single role that comes up in MACE now has to be internally and externally marketed, which we actually never had before. So I think there was a culture maybe where you could promote people into roles, or you could maybe even potentially design roles around people that you wanted to promote. That doesn't happen anymore. So every single role that we have has to go out and an external and an internal vacancy list. And it really has started to make a difference. I think that supported by the whole inclusion and the work that we are doing, I think is actually started to mean that more women are actually putting themselves forward for roles that they might not have done before. So if we just click onto the next slide. Oh, sorry. There it is. So yes, if you look at us as a business, so we have been tracking for some time where we sit in the ratio of men to women. I did talk a little while ago about the fact that across our business we have 4 very different sectors. We are consistently bad across all of them. I can't say you could pick any area apart from my own where you can say actually that we're doing it right. But we will always judge ourselves as a business. But for a company that sits over so many different sectors, it is you know, there are you know, some quite apparent differences across those sectors, and we are going to be working much harder. So even though as a business we actually haven't reported the breakdown of what that looks like, we are within MACE as of next year. So it is going to be about not so much calling out the bad behaviours, but trying to look at the areas where we've got really good behaviours and trying to take some lessons learned from that. So if you look at where we were in the third quarter of 2017, we sat at 28.91%. At the end of quarter 2 of 2018, we sat at 30.26. So a 1.35% improvement. I've had some quite heated debates around the fact that we should be setting out a 10-year framework, and we should be saying actually in the next 10 years we would have you know, we would have vastly improved how we operate. I think it's a difficult one because we don't want to be hitting targets, but already organically we've made such a difference. And actually we would make it would only take 7.5 years to make a 10% improvement, which is something that me and the other business unit directors would be incredibly proud of. So apologies, you know, we will keep on tracking it. It's important that we do. I honestly do think the way we are going with the behavioural frameworks and the unconscious bias behaviour training, that will incrementally go up over the next couple of years. It will be very interesting as well to look at the 10 steps when we start to push it out to each of the different business units and areas, you know, where we really need to work. So that will be another important benchmark for us next year. Can we just go to the next slide? So for me, one of the other really important things that we did last year was around our keeping in touch days. So it's the first year that I've really had the opportunity to work with our ladies coming back, ladies and actually gents. There has been some gents that have taken maternity time off within our sector. And everyone in our business on maternity leave gets 10 keep in touch days. So these are days in which they can either come into the business, we can go and meet them in different areas, or we've actually even gone as far as taking some of our ladies out to some of our new projects so they can see, you know, some of the new work that's going on. But they have been a very important benchmark for us. I think the first round of people come back off maternity, they didn't really get the benefit of actually what these keeping in touch days really mean. But we've worked really hard with 3 ladies this year to make sure that when they've come back, they know what's going on. We've discussed all the opportunities with them, and they've had very, very good experiences. So off the back of that, at the last inclusion steering group, which I sat on 2 weeks ago, we are going to survey every person that's come back off maternity leave. We're going to ask them about what their experiences were like and look at how we how we take the best and worst of what's been done. The other thing that we are going to do this year is we are going to launch the Returners Programme, which is a WISE 2-day event, which talks about how sort of sets out the parameters of how returners come back to work. So I think we've picked 4 or 5 people in January. They're going to come back and go through that program. Just one thing that actually I forgot as I was going through, due to the fact that we are doing the diversity, the unconscious bias training online, we're also going to look at survey is probably the wrong word, but look how if that has made a difference across our business. So we are going to sit down and go through about 20% of the people that have gone through the unconscious bias training to make sure that they've got the right messages out of it. I think if we'd had the opportunity now, we probably would have gone back and made it purely class-based training, but we are going to go back and just check that the message has hit home with everyone. So I think that's me done. I don't know if I'm going to answer questions now or at the end.
Okay, so I thought that what we'd do is we'd answer a few questions now, if that's okay. So thank you very much, Zoe. Really appreciate your going through all those slides. There's been quite a few questions come in, actually, so that's fantastic.
I was dead. You know what? I was dead on 25 minutes as well. I was really proud of myself.
You've done fantastically well. I'm very proud. Okay, so first question, I'll select them carefully, don't worry. Okay, no, there was an awful lot of interest in your Women of the Future programme, and there was people have been asking quite a few questions actually. How do you select the people for that programme, and do you have people that don't get through, or is it somebody puts them forward for those roles?
Do you know what I was meant to cover that in my slide. So every business unit across May. So I think as a business, I think we have over 200 different business units. So everyone has to put candidates forward. So different business units put different people forward for the program, and then we have a board that goes through and selects them. So there is a selection process. The line manager and the business unit director have to support that. So they will write they will support that, and they write a supporting application for each of those people to go forward, and then there is a board that goes through and selects those people.
Okay, brilliant. That's clarified that. Out of interest, is there a limit to the number of people that you would offer a place to each year, or is it a case of you see some really good applicants and you decide to offer the number of places depending on the quality of the applicants that you have?
Yeah, I mean, it has changed year to year, and that's one of the reasons why we split it down into the international and the UK one, actually, so we could get more people through it. We obviously have to be realistic because there's, they go out for days. We get speakers in. We have an alignment with the Imperial College for different speakers. So we've only got the capacity, just as a business, to put a certain amount of people through. I mean, we've only got the capacity to take 100 graduates at the moment. So we can't go too crazy, just for the fact that we just don't have the space really to provide the training and what's required.
Yeah, there's a lot required for all of these programs, isn't there? There's been a question on your returner program as well. So I think this question is asking about, do you offer the returner program to just employees of Mace at the moment, or would you offer it to somebody who's, say, moved away as a career break and is then coming back into the organisation?
Yep, no, it's for everyone. So I think that's one of the things that we are doing. So, we are talking really about the female agenda here, but it is much broader, much broader. People that have taken on time off sick. So actually, the returners program is for everyone.
Okay, brilliant. And I think really one of the last questions to ask is, there's been quite a difficult question come actually. I'll see how it goes. There's somebody asking. There's somebody asking here, how can we promote women without making it appear that we're focusing just on women and we're not thinking about the men within the company?
And I think that's the challenge that we all have, because none of us want to be promoted just because we are a woman. And
Yes.
so none of us ever want to be in that situation. I think a lot of the work that our MACE people are doing is a really, really important part of that, because the one thing that I hear consistently across everyone that I speak to, we just don't get good women CVs, which drives me insane, because I see the same CVs as everyone else. So I actually think that a lot of it will happen around the fact that we are just getting the right people coming forward for jobs, the right people putting themselves forward in MACE for those jobs. So there's not one person within our business, including all the females, that would want to be given a job just because they are female, and that won't happen. It would always be best candidate for the job. I mean, I was asked by a very senior member of one of our clients. He's like, "How comes you've done it and no one else has done?" I think I was quite fortunate, because I started my business unit from no people. It went from 0 to 130 over 4 years, and I think I got the opportunity to bring good women into the business I'd worked with in the last 20 years. So actually, I was always at a pretty good footing, because I got to start my business unit from nothing. It's going to take some time, I think, for the balance to shift, but it will happen in time. I think the more people we get in senior women roles, the more the balance, it will just start to tip the balance over, hopefully.
Yeah. And getting the buy-in of men as well, I assume, and getting them to support all of these.
I feel privileged to a certain extent. I mean, obviously, this is recorded, so I don't really want the men that own this business to hear this, but I do feel privileged. The fact that, they are so supportive of this, of this agenda. They find it as unfair as we do, and it's not always the case. I think in other businesses we are very well supported, which is a good place to be.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your presentation, and it's been fantastic having you here, and we really appreciate it. So I'm sure you'll hang on till the end in case we've got any other final questions, and we can always pass questions on to Zoe if you've got any questions that you think of at a later stage. She's quite happy to answer those. Thank you. So I think without further ado, we'll move on to our next presentation. And this presentation is Shelley Cotton, and she's the head of culture and diversity at BAM Nuttall. And I'm going to hand over to her. So continue to put your questions in, and we'll take those at the end.
Thank you, Claire. Welcome, everybody. As Claire just mentioned, I'm Shelley Cotton, head of culture and diversity at BAM Nuttall. If you don't know who BAM Nuttall are, well, we're a civil engineering company, part of the Royal BAM Group, who are based in Holland, and we're really the UK infrastructure arm of the civils arm of that business. So our projects are roads, bridges, tunnels, and then the wider, we look at nuclear, renewables, flood events, for example. So we have around 3,000 employees in the UK, and around a third of those are actually our operatives, and these are the people who are really doing the work on the ground. So less than 1% of those people are women. So we have very, very small numbers of operatives and those skilled craft people working for us. Broader business, we're looking at 17%. So 17% women, and we've had generally a 1% increase on that each year. So for a very long time, we were stuck at 13, 14%. So that does seem to be creeping. We just need to make sure it's the right measurement, and it's not just because we're losing men from the business, which can happen when we close down big projects. So, right. So I'm really going to be talking to you about how we use the WISE 10 steps within BAM Nuttall. And Zoe's already given us some really great examples how changes happened in MACE. And I hope I can just bring another perspective to this for you. So a little insight to me is I'm actually terrible at measuring things. I'm one of the very few creative types in our business. So it's really a case of, we have a real culture. If it feels right, then it's probably working. so for me, the 10 steps has really encouraged us to sit deeper than what the abstract feels like, and providing some structure around what's important for us to focus on. So, Balmatul, we've been early signatories of the WISE 10 steps, so I think this is the third year that we've submitted our diagnostic. And so I'll just share with you how these 10 steps have given us this focus. So first off, it's around completing the diagnostic. And Claire referred to it earlier, that the more people you ask to give their opinion, the better the results. So we have an overall company score. We ask our different divisions to complete the diagnostic. And in BAM, we have our Women at BAM group. It's really like a task force looking at driving change to our business. And we have a perspective from them also. And it does have a dramatic variance on your overall score, but it's really okay to notice that. And what's really important actually about the diagnostic is it's not about being the company that sits at the top of the WISE scoring board. You know, your scores will go up and down over the years, and that's really okay. It's a really good sign of progress. So how do we maximise the benefit of using the 10 steps? If we could have the next slide, please. So those of you who are familiar with the 10 steps will kind of recognise this spider graph. This is really interesting because it does show you the differences in perception across the business when you overlap the scores that you get. Not necessarily this graph, but one of the interesting points for us is when we compare our company scores with our divisional director scores, so they will all respond on behalf of their own division. The divisional director aggregate is pretty low. And when we look at understanding the starting point, as a business, we score ourselves an 8 out of 10. And our divisional directors score a 3 out of 10. So we really take time to say, what is not keeping these issues at the forefront of our divisional directors' minds? Because as a business improvement project, we're really clear. So is that because we're not making it relevant for them? And so, we really have to think about, so what are the things, how do we keep promoting this, these things that we're doing, the improvements, to make sure it really is at the forefront of their mind? And as I said, we asked our Women at BAM group to complete the diagnostic tool as well. And we compiled an aggregate score to represent the views of women in our business. And if you just look at that graph, you can really just see that actually it's a similar shape, but we have, there's a really big gap there between what we feel as a business and in demonstrating to women that we want to retain and develop them, and what the actual opinions of the women are. And so if we look at that one in particular, we feel that we're doing everything. I mean, we've scored ourselves a 10 on that. However, the perception of those women in that group is that, actually you're middling. And so what that really helps us do is we use these gaps to drive the agenda of our Women at BAM quarterly meetings, just to make sure that we don't just keep doing the easy stuff, and that we can really see where the gaps are and where these need work, and actually where we're doing well and when we can celebrate this. And it's really a reminder that we must recognise this as an acknowledgement of progress as well as the gap analysis. Very easy to beat ourselves up around these things, but actually it's really important to recognise progress. And transparency of opportunities is actually the only area there where our women have scored the company perspective higher. So that's fabulous. So actually it may feel when we look at what we're doing on a piece of paper that maybe we're not doing enough, but that does feel slightly different and a little bit more positive for our women. So I think my point is here is the difference in what you do and how it feels are very different to your business. And how do we measure this? Well, as I say, we use this Women at BAM score to measure how the 10 steps have impacted our culture, really. There's always a difference between scoring what we do and scoring how effective we are. that's just an important point just to keep checking. So yes, I said that the shapes are similar, but that perceived impact is different, and it's really important that we recognise that. And that's one great way how we can use the 10 steps to do that. Okay, next slide, please. So one of the ways we use WISE 10 steps is in our gender diversity action plans. If you look down the left-hand side, I mean, it's very small. We will share this with you. But we have the 1 to 10 points of the WISE 10 steps. And what we ask is, we ask each of our divisions to complete this. And they give us what their programme has looked like to date, and what that target will look like going forward. How this really helps us is that actually it gives real good business importance and credibility to what that needs to look like. And each of our divisional directors will submit this at the start of the year. And I sit down with them a couple of times a year just to kind of do a sense check of what they're doing, to kind of recognise good practice so I can share that with the other divisions. And really just to make sure that they're accountable for driving change within their own area of the business. And actually, it really does encourage healthy competition between the different divisions as well. And that's always a good thing, I find. And then all these activities in here are generally, they are supported by their own divisional teams if they have them, and their Women at BAM representatives. So all this stuff, you know, it's very important to us that culturally it's something that we do because everybody's engaged in and understands how it can make it better. So it really is a team effort when we drive these changes. It is not driven from the centre. Should mention as well, there is a KPI for each of our divisions on their gender split. And actually 2019 will be the first year that we've asked each of our divisional directors to provide a narrative on this in their operating plan. So how will they make sure that their teams are diverse? How do they make sure that their business practices are inclusive? And how will they make sure that, you know, we have senior representation for women? Okay, next slide, please. Very lovely, thank you. So there's these 4 other areas where really the WISE 10 steps can help. And if we look at broader diversity, the steps really can be transferred over to any area of diversity and kind of inclusion sense. We use it to kind of educate our diversity champion network across BAM Nuttall. And actually we use the 10 steps in the formation of our Proud at BAM LGBT+ task group and network development. And that really helped us to ensure that we fully understood our purpose. So I think you'll find there's a lot of cross-business benefit from following the WISE 10 steps, and it's not just about gender diversity. If we look at common language, when we are talking about the WISE 10 steps, it really gives us the ability to talk about the same topics using that common language. I mean, I often find myself saying, oh, well, that's a great example of sponsoring female talent, or that's really good indication of creative job design. And managers know what I'm talking about. And that's what's really great. I mean, as I say, we are 3 years into using a diagnostic tool, but you don't need to use the tool to recognise that that these concepts and these 10 steps are actually embedded in your business. Now, I'm not going to say that you could have that conversation with one of our operatives on a project and they'd understand what we were talking about, but certainly across the senior leadership teams and the management teams. Also, where the 10 steps is really helpful is not just within our business, but also outside of our business and across the industry. And where that's recognised across multiple organisations within our sector, it really does allow for stronger collaboration. And I also think for our customers as a commercial advantage, a lot of our customers are signatories, like Network Rail, like Highways England. So it really makes it simple to talk about our business case when we're talking about work winning opportunities. Okay, so within BAM Nuttall, so the accountability from leadership and the Women at BAM Group and our culture and diversity team's strategic vision really means that the business is united on the WISE 10 steps and its aims. And it really does come across as common language. So with scoring, really important to recognise that low scores give us validation too. So for BAM Nuttall, our bottom scores in 2018, actually scores don't really matter, but what's really important about this piece is having the conversations and the reflections. So our bottom scores were, I completely missed the piece of paper that it had on, were around increased transparency of opportunity and being creative in job design. So yeah, so there's being creative in job design scored as a 3, and increasing transparency of opportunities scored as a 6. So if there's anybody listening who's got some great insight into how to be more creative in job design, then give me a call. But as I say, you know, it's really important. So how we use that now is when we are talking about what, it kind of gives us that focus on priority. And so we really need to know, we know that really needs to be a focus for us in 2019 and going forward. And what it does as well, it gives it real credibility in the business when we're looking at working on these things and those initiatives that follow that. So it also really helps across the divisions. I said about creating competition. Focusing on why one division may score lower than another really helps us to share that best practice and maintain the high scores within the divisions. So, you know, culturally, we know that so job design and transparency of opportunity are also lower scores in other surveys we do in the business. So we have a group-led pulse check, which is run monthly. And in our operating plan of 2019, we've committed to improvements in these areas, and they align with our WISE scores. So it's great that you can really drive that change, and actually, you know, you'll find that lower scores have relevance elsewhere in your business. So it's not just around that gender diversity piece, but actually it's really important that we combine all our initiatives so that they do have more relevance within our own businesses. And then continuity. So this is a big one. So we score ourselves once a year for WISE, and don't assume that something is fixed. If you've got a good score, don't assume that it's always going to be a big score, because we have evidence that thinking it's okay and assessing it are two different things. It is continuous and it does need to be monitored. So I'll give you an example for me. So for the past 2 years or so, I've been really looking at maternity very closely. We've not had a problem. We have had no maternity leavers, and that's fantastic. Then all of a sudden, last month, one of our HR advisors came up to me and said, "We've had 2 resignations from maternity returners," and I'm like, "What have we done wrong?" And I'm sure, you know, there's nothing that we're doing, but it's really important that you don't lose sight of that. Maybe we did take our eye off the ball with maternity returners, thinking that we'd got it sorted. So, as I say, it's really important that we just don't lose that, and actually we don't start doing things that have a negative impact on our gender diversity plans in the business. So there's been certain things that happen internally around how we manage our central costs, for example, and how that may have a significant impact on how we return women into our business. So we're constantly thinking about that impact of business decisions on our gender diversity and indeed our broader diversity. So WISE 10 Steps allows for a real central benchmarking tool to return to over time, and it's really useful as a first step to diagnose the maturity of your current gender diversity programs, but then equally it's really useful going forward to create your action plans. So that's really how we use the 10 steps diagnostic. And I was also asked to share just a couple of the 10 steps and what we're doing. So one of the really important things I'd like to get across to everybody is in the sharing and learning steps. You know, I think everyone thinks that everyone else is miles ahead of us. But actually, when you take the time to talk, you time and effort to talk about what you're doing in your business, the response is generally amazing. So Steve Fox, our CEO, recently spoke at a Highways England inclusion event with his reverse mentor, Erosha. And off the back of that, I have had so many requests for support, advice, how did we start it, what are we doing next? And that's really great to know that, you know, what we're doing and what we're doing, talking about what we're doing, really does benefit our peers. And equally, I have to stress that we wouldn't have got to the place that we are without the influence of our peers as well. And it seems that particularly in civils, we seem to have a number of task and steering groups. So it's always really good to get involved and work collaboratively to strengthen your own sector. And the other area is around flexible working, and it's really promising that Zoe's also seeing this in Mace as well. So traditionally, the engineering sector, very long hours, working away from home. So for us, flexible working or agile working is really important. And we have a policy that all applications will be approved. Any that can't seem to work will be reviewed by the board. And that's really important so that we can understand the barriers and work to remove or find a compromise. However, having that policy in place isn't enough. So we also enforce wellbeing conversations in our PDRs and promote case studies of that. And, you know, it's really about going back and educating our leaders and our managers and our supervisors, you know, making sure that role modelling behaviours that shun presenteeism and that leaders challenge our clients as well to review contractual requirements, as that's sometimes a bit of a blocker for us when you get into the contractual kind of nitty gritty. So so please share, because you may think that what you're doing is amazing, but actually it will be, because everybody's on a different stage in their maturity journey. And flexible working, just really trying to make it possible for everybody and educating your managers and your leaders as to what the benefits of flexible working are and actually how simply they can be accommodated. Okay, thank you. That's from me, Claire.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shelley. That's been a fantastic presentation again. We have had quite a few questions come in again, so, okay. So I'm afraid it's your turn to have all the questions now. It's been really, I think there's been a lot of interest in the fact that you had two groups of people effectively do the 10 steps benchmarking process. And there's been some questions around who initiated the multiple groups of people taking up those that benchmarking, and is this something new, or is this something you've done previously that you found worked well, or what was the reason behind having multiple groups take part in the benchmarking?
Okay, so when we did the first year, we did it by ourselves, and then within that year, it was I imagine it was Steve who wanted to try and put KPIs against the gender split within our division. So I went to one of our senior management meetings and introduced 10 steps to them and asked them all to do their own diagnostic. So we did that, and I think it was quite surprising to see how disparate the scores were between the different regions, how somebody thought that you know, because they did something meant that they scored the highest score and other people were challenging. It's actually prompted quite interesting discussion in that room. So off the back of that, that's when we then took that to our Women at BAM group and asked them to do the same. And then we started making, you know, when we provided the aggregate scores, and then start to to kind of measure the difference really, rather than the highest and the lowest scores.
Mm-hmm. That's actually a really interesting point. One of the other questions that came in was, did you discuss these differences internally? So now that you've got these two similar but different in various areas results, did you discuss those differences internally, and what actions have you planned to come out of that? Is there anything that you're going to be doing, or anything you plan to do with that difference?
So yeah, absolutely. So when we have our Women at BAM meetings, our agenda is actually based on the 10 steps. And so we look at where our low scores are, and for each of our Women at BAM meetings, we have a guest chair, and they invite their divisional director. So we always have a divisional director or a representative around the table, so they can actually hear what those differences are, and it helps us bring those differences to the forefront. And equally, they will all have their own improvements on their own gender diversity action plans as well. But culturally, it's very helpful to have those discussed in our Women at BAM groups.
Yes, yeah, that's fantastic. I really hope it'll be really interesting to see what happens next year with it as well. Okay, another question was based around your flexible working. So they said it's fantastic that you have this flexible working policy. How do you get managers to buy into the flexible working policy while still delivering their targets? It's a perennial question, really, isn't it? But how do you get the buy-in of managers with your policy that all flexible working is approved?
Yeah, it really is on a case-by-case basis. So we talk about the benefits of flexible working when managers receive their kind of annual training for our performance development reviews. So we make sure that they're talking about that with their teams. And really, it's a reminder of actually, your people will be more productive in the long run if we can resolve this. And I promise you, it is not always possible. We have lots of restrictions on whether people can be on site or off site. So it's not always possible, but that's when the board, and we haven't had one referred to the board yet, but that's where they would really be able to kind of influence and kind of break down those barriers with the client where we do have those contractual things. But we haven't fixed it. There's still a lot of education that goes on. So case studies are really important to try and help show that flexible working is possible within your business, and sharing those. Yeah.
Actually, I've just had somebody make a comment about the fact they said they absolutely agree with the sharing. They've just launched a program at the BBC on the back of what other organisations have done. So sharing really does make a difference, and they've said sharing is caring. So it really makes a difference.
Did I type that?
And one final question really was how much difference, you talk about Steve being on board with a lot of these initiatives, how much difference does it make to you having an executive member fully on board with all of your decisions and all of your processes and the 10 steps?
Oh God, it is. I mean, it's invaluable. It really is invaluable. And not only do we have Steve, who is such a huge advocate and visible actually within our industry, talking about gender diversity and needs. We also have a people and culture director, Alistair, who without him, a lot of this stuff would not be given the business priority that it needs. So he sits directly on our executive board, and his focus is around, the people and the culture of our business. So it really does help us drive these things, and actually has credibility. And I think giving somebody within the business that responsibility means that the other directors, all our divisional directors sit a level below Alistair. So, he really is a senior member of the team, and can actually ask for the evidence from them that they are actually doing something.
Yes, yeah, I can only say to everyone that it's like you say, it's so invaluable having somebody who takes on board all these processes and supports you at every step of the way. So yeah, fantastic to hear that you've got that support and that you're moving forward. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for your presentation, both to you and to Zoe. I think we've all learned a lot this afternoon. I think there's another slide, isn't there, Catherine? So if you wouldn't mind moving on to that next one. This is just a bit of a plug for forthcoming events coming up in Wise. So we have our next event, our next knowledge sharing event is a networking meeting that's going to be held down here in Bracknell. I live in Reading, so it's down here. And that's going to be increasing IP and innovation opportunities for women in research. So we're looking at how can you improve the number of women in research and what can companies do. And we're going to be hearing from 4 fantastic speakers on that subject. So that registration is open now, so please do go online and register for that event. Open to all members from core level upwards. Then in February, we're going to have another webinar on the new People Like Me program. So we've got a new improved People Like Me program, outreach program coming out. And that's going to be, it's data still to be confirmed, but we're going to be having that in February. And finally, a bit of a plug for the WISE conference coming up in May. So it's a save the date, please, for the 14th of May. And that's going to be held in the IET in London. So please do keep an eye out for the conference and think about coming to that. It's an excellent event for companies to come along to, and for all of our affiliate members to come along to as well. So we get a lot of networking, a lot of people all talking at that event. Finally, just to say that the webinar will be shortly available online. We have recorded it and it will be online very shortly in our 10 steps area. The full 10 steps making progress report, there's quite a thick document heading your way, has been released as well. Sorry, hasn't been released, but will be released shortly. So that should be coming your way as well. And finally, I just want to say thank you so much to all our speakers, to Zoe and to Shelley, and thank you very much to Catherine for behind the scenes. And we look forward to seeing you at our next WISE events. So thank you very much.